Let's learn about APIs. So in this video tutorial, one of the mentors in my coding bootcamp is going to walk you through how to use Axios, a JavaScript library, to make API requests. Now, if you don't know what an API is simply a way for you to integrate the raw data from any other website into your own application. So just for example, let's say that you don't like Twitter's UI and you want to build your own version of Twitter, but you still want to use actual tweets. Well, Twitter has an API that gives you access to their raw data so that you can access all your tweets in Twitter and still integrate it into your own version of Twitter. Okay, so an API is just a way for you to access the raw data from any other website so that you can integrate it into your own website. And to make API requests, a common JavaScript technology that's used is Axios. So this video tutorial is going to walk you through how to make a GET request with Axios and also how to make POST requests, which is where you update data using Axios. So my name is TJ Oyenigi, and I help beginners become software engineers in my coding bootcamp by mentoring them on their coding journey and by pairing them with an accountability partner that they meet with every week to help them to stay committed and to hold them accountable on their coding journey. So if you want to learn more about learning to code with me as your mentor, check the description below for more information on my coding bootcamp. Now, let's get to the API tutorial.
Hey guys, it's Obi, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make API requests using Axios. If you're not familiar with what an API is, it's a simple way of getting raw data from a website. In today's tutorial, we'll be using the free JSON placeholder API to make our Axios request. So let's go to the JSON placeholder API. Okay, and let's go to the first result. Let's go down. So what this website is a free API where you can make GET requests, POST requests, any type of HTTP requests to a API, which in this case is the JSON placeholder API. And it gives us multiple endpoints, which are the post endpoint, comments, albums, photos, to-dos, and users. Let's go to the users endpoint, which we'll be using. And let's take a look at the raw data. So this users endpoint gives us a list of 10 users. So this is what we'll be using for our Axios request to make a GET and POST request. So in order to make our Axios request, we're going to be following this tutorial. And by the way, all of the resources that I pull up in this video will be pasted down below in the description so you can follow along. So how to use Axios to make HTTP requests in JavaScript. Axios is an open source library for making asynchronous HTTP requests to REST endpoints in the browser and Node.js. It is a promise-based HTTP client that can be used in plain JavaScript and in modern JavaScript frameworks like React, Angular, Vue.js, etc. Okay, so let's go down to installation. And in this tutorial, we'll be using a CDN, which is a content delivery network, which is this right here. So let's just go ahead and just see exactly what this is, if you were wondering. Let's paste this into the browser. As you can see, this is just raw JavaScript that allows us to use Axios. So let's go to Google and type in JSBin, and let's set up our environment. We need HTML, JavaScript, and the console. And in order to install Axios, we need to use this CDN. So let's copy this and let's paste this right below the closing body tag. And just to make sure we have everything working properly, let's go back and let's go down to the example, and let's copy this request right here just to make sure that everything's working. And by the way, we will not be using this endpoint. We'll be using the JSON placeholder API, which I showed you earlier. So let's go back to JSBin. Let's paste this function into our JavaScript. Let's run this, and sweet, we see that Axios is actually working. So let's comment this out, and we can use this for just boilerplate in how we're going to be making the GET request to the API that we're using. Let's comment that out. Let's clear that. Let's open the placeholder API one more time. So now in order to make our GET request, which is a request to fetch a resource, we kind of want to follow what they have for the fetch users function. So let's go ahead and create an arrow function called const, let's say get users, create the arrow function, and we're using Axios, and we're doing a GET request. So we're going to put Axios.get, and we see that the first parameter is the endpoint. So let's go back here, let's go to users, and we can just copy this URL and put it between quotes. And then we know that this returns a promise, so we can chain on a .then, and we know that we get a response. And because we're using Axios and not the regular fetch, we don't have to chain on the .json. We don't have to parse it into JSON. We can just say response, or we want to console.logout the response.data. And then now let's invoke this function, get users, and let's run this, and we should see a list of 10 users. Sweet. And then just to verify, let's go back to the endpoint, and let's see, we have for the first user, we have Leanne Graham. Let's go back, and we should see Leanne Graham for the name of the first one, which is right here. Awesome. Sweet. So there you have it. You just learned how to make a GET request. So now I'm going to show you how to make a POST request, which is creating a resource. And we're going to be using the same API endpoint, which is the users, and we're going to be using Axios as well. So let's go back to the tutorial. Let's go down to POST requests. So in the example, they are using this right here. So let's copy this and just paste it in. So we kind of have boilerplate, something that we're looking at. Paste this in, and let's kind of go over what they're doing. So they're creating a function called create user, and this is actually a object that they're passing in. So we're not going to be using that. We'll just create an object, and they're using Axios.post. They're pasting in the endpoint, and this, so the post takes in a second parameter, which is an object, and it returns a promise, and they're chaining on the .then, and they're putting the response.data, which they're getting back, into a variable called added user, and they're logging that out, and then appending that to the DOM, and then catching any errors. Okay, sweet. So we have kind of an example of what we want to do. So like I said, they're passing in an object, and we don't want to do that. We just want to log out the user that we're creating. So let's create a object called user. So const user equal to an object. And we know, if we go back to this endpoint, we know that we have a list of this object. So we're not going to create each and every single key and value. Let's just create a name, username, and email. So let's go here, and let's say name is equal to Johnny Bravo. Username is JB123, and the email is jb@gmail.com. Okay, so we have the user object. So now let's create a function called create user. So const create user, and this will be an arrow function. Okay. So looking at this, they use Axios.post. So let's use that, Axios.post. we're going to, for the first parameter, we're going to paste in the endpoint that we're making that post request to, which is this right here. Paste that in. And then we know that it takes a second parameter of an object we're creating, or that we have the data to create the post request. So let's paste in the user, which is coming from this user object right here. And this returns a promise. So we can chain on a .then. So if we look back at this example, we have a response. Okay. So we have the response callback, and we want to console.log the response.data, which is the user that we are creating. We're creating that post request to that endpoint. So let's go down here and let's invoke this new function called create user. Just do this, create user, invoke it. Okay. So when I run this, we should see a new user with the ID of 11 because the endpoint already has 10 users, and we should have an ID of 11 with the name Johnny Bravo, the username JB123, and the email jb@gmail.com. So let's run this, and there we go. We get the new object. And then if we kind of want to see everything in a new list, so the new endpoint with 11 users, we know that JavaScript went from top to bottom, so we can go back up here, uncomment this out, and then we can uncomment that out. Okay, so let's cut that, create user, and then we want to get all the users. And then let's run this. And then as you can see, we get the original list of 10 users plus the added user that we just created a post request to. And voila, you see it. If you have any questions, let me know down below in the comments, and I will do my best to reach out to each and every single one of you guys and get it resolved. Thank you for watching.